Well, everybody, welcome to a very special video. Today, we, of course, are going to be reacting to the SEC 2026 through 2029 opponents. This probably will be a full video. This is probably going to be a 20-minute plus video because I want to talk about each team and break each team down in this video. Gonna be a long one, so just stay tuned for that one. If you are new to the channel, though, you already know what to do. Hit that sub button, leave a comment down below so you don't miss out on any of the latest videos. Later today, we will, of course, have our NFL prediction video. Tomorrow, we'll do SEC reactions and predictions. We'll also play our Road to Glory in EA Sports College Football 26 as well, and talk about the MLB playoffs as we are in the final weekend of the regular season. And then Friday, we will be playing a Madden franchise. We'll talk about the Champions League as well, as we haven't hit on soccer at all. And then we'll also play our Vanderbilt Dynasty video along with a special video, a PSA order reveal video if my cards get back in time. But first, if you are new to the channel, like I said, before we hop into today's video, hit that sub button. Leave a comment down below. We talk college football pretty much every single day. So if you're into that, if you're into soccer, baseball, soccer, all of that stuff, hit that sub button. Leave a comment down below so you don't miss out on any of our latest videos. And without further ado, let us go ahead and hop right into these SEC reactions for the 2026 to 2029 opponents. So we're just going to break this down team by team because that's all we got to have to go by for each year. So that's what we're going to do, and that's why this video may be a long one. So strap in if you're interested in my reaction to these SEC, of course, opponents being revealed last night. Let us go ahead, though, and talk about the Alabama Crimson Tide to kick us off. In 2026, they will host Auburn. They go to Mississippi State and Tennessee. They will host Georgia. They will host South Carolina. They will host A&M. They are at Kentucky, at LSU, and at Vanderbilt. So, for me, a pretty lenient schedule for the Alabama Crimson Tide in 2026, if you're asking me. Their away games aren't too terrible. They got Kentucky. LSU will probably be their hardest one, as usual. But they got Mississippi State. They got at Vandy as well. And they're hosting South Carolina. So, this is a very manageable schedule for the Alabama Crimson Tide. And they get Georgia at home in 2026. So, very interested to see how they can do it with Kalen DeBoer and company in 2026. Let's talk about 2027 because this is where the tide kind of turns a little bit. This is where the new, I guess you would say, SEC opponents are kind of revealed. We already knew 2026, but 2027 is where it kind of starts to get a little bit different. They go to Auburn. They host Mississippi State, so those two are flip-flop right there. Then they host Tennessee. They are, of course, at home against Florida. Florida going to Bryant-Denny is going to be a very interesting matchup in 2027. I'm very curious to see if DJ Lagway is still the quarterback at Florida by that time. They will host Missouri, so I'm very interested to see where they will stand in SEC play. They host Texas. This game actually happened a few years ago when they did host Texas at Bryant-Denny Stadium the year before they joined, of course, the SEC. But this is going to be a very interesting one to watch in 2027. So they host Texas. Then their road games are Arkansas, Ole Miss, and Oklahoma. So a very tough road schedule for the Crimson Tide in 2027 with Auburn, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, and Arkansas. That Alabama-Ole Miss matchup going to be a very interesting one in 2027 because it's going to be like the first time that those two teams will have played each other. So very interested to watch that one as 2027's opponents for the Alabama Crimson Tide do get a little bit harder. Moving on to 2028, you get Auburn at home once again. You're at Mississippi State. Then you're at Tennessee. Those are the three rival opponents that they confirmed right there. But you get Kentucky, LSU, and Vanderbilt at home while going to Georgia, South Carolina, and Texas A&M. That Texas A&M game will also be a very interesting one because they always seem to have a dynamic crowd in 2028. But that is way too far for us to talk about anything that is happening right now that will affect those squads. These two rosters are going to look entirely different, so we won't talk about that. Just my initial thoughts on those further scheduled opponents right there. Then in 2029, you are at Auburn again, at home against State, at home against Tennessee, at home against Arkansas, at home against Ole Miss, at home against Oklahoma. Then you go to Florida, Missouri, and Texas. So lots of home games for the Alabama Crimson Tide in 2029. Going to be very interesting to see how they, of course, will close out their schedule. Now, let us talk about the Arkansas Razorbacks because we have not hit on them enough in the college football season at all. So in 2026, you host LSU, Missouri, Georgia, South Carolina, and Tennessee. In 2026, you also go to Auburn, Texas A&M, Vanderbilt, and Texas. That Texas game is going to be a very important one for the Arkansas Razorbacks if they want to get back on the map. So that, to me, is probably the most interesting game of the 2026 slate. Of course, at Texas A&M, it's not going to be an easy one either. And then at home against LSU, well, we all know what the LSU Tigers bring to the table. So that Arkansas's got their work cut out for them next year. That is for sure. And they get South Carolina and Georgia at home as well. In 2027, we got at LSU, at Missouri, then you go to Florida, and you go to Mississippi State and Oklahoma. So a little bit more lenient on the road schedule, other than, of course, LSU and Florida. So it definitely can be a manageable schedule right there. Then you got Texas, Alabama, Kentucky, and Ole Miss at home. Those games are going to be a very tough matchups for the Arkansas football squad right there. 2027 might actually be a tough time for some Arkansas fans. And then in 2028, at home at LSU, at home against Missouri, at home against Auburn, at home against A&M, and then, of course, at home against Vanderbilt. So pretty lenient home games if you're asking me. Going to be very interesting, though. At Texas, at Georgia, at South Carolina, and at Tennessee. That at Tennessee game is going to be a very fun one, and I'm very sad that that is one of the ones that they did not keep on the rivalry slate. But hey, it is what it is, as we will get that matchup back with us in, of course, 2026 and 2028. And then in 2029, to close us out, we're not going to preview any of those matchups or anything because, again, those are way too far out. But at LSU, at Missouri, of course, at Alabama, at Kentucky, and at Ole Miss, where you come home, you host Texas, host Florida, host Mississippi State, and host Oklahoma. So more road games than home games in 2029 in the SEC. But hey, it is what it is. Some years they're going to be like that, as the Arkansas Razorbacks opponents to us have been revealed. Now, let us talk about the Auburn Tigers football opponents in 2026 and 2027. In 2026, at home against Vanderbilt, at Bama, at Georgia. Those are going to be the toughest games of the year, obviously, for the Auburn Tigers. Then you got Arkansas, Florida, LSU at home, while going on the road to Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and Tennessee. Dude, going on the road to Tennessee next year is going to be so much fun, and I'm going to try my hardest to be at that game no matter what. That game is going to be such a fun game in Neyland Stadium, and I cannot wait for it. As soon as it was announced, I was super excited about it. Another one that I was excited about next year is at home against LSU and at home against Florida for the first time since 2011. Those two games right there are going to be super fun, and I'm very glad that they gave us some opponents that we can actually work with when we replace Alabama and Georgia at home on the road. So that's going to be very fun. Those two games might be a little bit tricky at home against LSU and at home against Florida. That Tennessee game, though, next year, I cannot wait for that matchup, and I'm going to try my hardest to be at that one at Neyland Stadium. In 2027, at Vanderbilt, at home against Georgia and Bama. Then you host South Carolina, host A&M, and host Oklahoma, with our 3 road games other than that being at Kentucky, at Missouri, and at Texas. At Texas and Austin in 2027 will be probably one of the first times that Auburn has played Texas in the newly SEC. So very excited about that one. Was kind of curious on when they would put Texas in our schedule. But hey, it is what it is, as we will be going to Austin in 2027. And maybe KJ Lacey will still be there. So it could be a kind of a KJ Lacey versus the Auburn Tigers type of situation there. But we shall see in 2027. In 2028, you get Vanderbilt at home. Go back on the road to Alabama and Georgia, right? Those are our 3 opponents that are rotating. Then you host Ole Miss, host Mississippi State, and host Tennessee. So we're hosting the 2 Mississippi schools in the same year. And that's going to be a very fun year as well for those season ticket holders. At Arkansas, at Florida, and at LSU. So basically just the 2026 schedule flip-flopped. But very interested in the Ole Miss game at home. Then, of course, you got at Florida and at LSU. At Florida is going to be a fun one in the swamp, and cannot wait for that one. And then at LSU in Death Valley, that will be a fun one as well. And then to close us out in 2029, not going to preview anything, like I said, just because that's way too far out. At Vanderbilt, at home against Georgia and Bama, at home against Kentucky, Missouri, and Texas. So our first time hosting Texas won't be for another 4 years. SEC, what are we doing? But we won't host Texas until 2029, where we will also be hosting Miami. So that's going to be a fun year for, of course, the Auburn Tigers. Then you got South Carolina, A&M, and Oklahoma on the road. So pretty manageable road schedule there for the Auburn Tigers to close us out. Now, let us talk about the Florida Gators here in this matchup. This is going to be a fun one as well. South Carolina, of course, at home in 2026 for the Florida Gators versus Georgia, of course, in Jacksonville, I believe. I think they're going to keep it the same. I'm not sure. But they do host Georgia. Then they go to Kentucky. Then they host Ole Miss, host Vanderbilt, host Oklahoma, at Auburn, at Missouri, and at Texas. So that's going to be a pretty brutal schedule for the Florida Gators. And then, of course, we all know the schedule that they play this year. So we'll see what they can do with that schedule. Even if Billy Napier's still the head coach, he may be gone by next year, that's for sure. At South Carolina versus Florida. At home against Kentucky, Arkansas, LSU, and A&M before going on the road to Tennessee, at Alabama, and at Mississippi State in 2027. That 2027 year for the Florida Gators is going to be such a fun year for fans. You go to Tennessee, you go to Alabama, you go to Mississippi State. Then, of course, not to mention you get LSU back at home, you get Arkansas at home, and you do get Georgia, of course, in the state of Florida as well. So that's going to be a fun matchup for the Florida Gators. That's going to be a fun year for Gators fans in 2027. In 2028, at home against South Carolina, at home against Auburn, Missouri, and Texas, before going on the road to Ole Miss, Vanderbilt, Oklahoma, and Kentucky. So a pretty manageable road schedule if we're looking at it right now in 2028 for the Florida Gators, as it does get kind of lenient there. You do host Auburn at home. That might be a tricky one. We'll see. Of course, you do get Georgia in Jacksonville as well. And then, of course, you do host Texas at home as well. And then in 2029, at South Carolina, of course, is one of their ones. Then you come home, or you play Georgia in Jacksonville, host Kentucky, host Alabama, host State, host Tennessee, with the 3 road games being Arkansas, LSU, and A&M. So a very, very manageable schedule for the Florida Gators in 2029. Now, let us talk about the Georgia Bulldogs. At home against Auburn in 2026, at home against Missouri, Vanderbilt, and Oklahoma in 2026. Then at Bama, at Arkansas, at Ole Miss, and at South Carolina. That road schedule for the Dogs is going to be tough, and I'm very interested to see how Kirby Smart can manage that road schedule. That's going to be a very good topic of discussion there next college football season, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. Now, in 2027, you're at Auburn, you host Florida, or you're at home against South Carolina, at home against LSU, at home against State, and at home against Tennessee. So a very manageable home schedule for the Dogs. Then the road schedule, of course, you're at Auburn, at Kentucky, at Texas A&M, and at Texas. So very interested to see how they can manage that schedule in 2027, as that is going to be a doozy for, of course, Georgia fans. Then in 2028, at home against Auburn versus Florida in Jacksonville, at South Carolina, at home against Alabama, Arkansas, and Ole Miss. Then Missouri, Vanderbilt, and Oklahoma on the road. So a very manageable home schedule and a very manageable, of course, road schedule for the Georgia Bulldogs in 2028. And then to close us out in 2029, at LSU, at Mississippi State, at Tennessee, and then, of course, at Auburn. That Georgia-LSU matchup in Death Valley is going to be a banger, and I cannot wait for it whatsoever. Then, at home, South Carolina, Kentucky, A&M, and Texas. So a very easy, kind of manageable schedule for the Dogs in 2029. Now let us talk about the Kentucky Wildcats, as we are just flying through these like they're nobody's business, because we just give our thoughts on them, and that's what we do. If you're into that stuff, hit that sub button, leave a comment down below so you don't miss out on any of the latest videos. Now, 2026, we get Florida at home, or Kentucky rather, not we, you know who I'm talking about. Florida's at home, Bama's at home, LSU's at home, and Vanderbilt's at home. Dude, the Kentucky Wildcats may actually go 0-4 at home, if you're asking me. Then, on the road, at South Carolina, at Tennessee, at Missouri, at A&M, and at Oklahoma. Man, that 2026 schedule is looking rough for the Kentucky Wildcats, man. We'll see what they can do, but as of right now, it is looking pretty rough. Then in 2027, you're at Florida, at home at South Carolina, at home against Tennessee, at home against Auburn, at home against Georgia, at home against Mississippi State, and then at home against Arkansas, at home against Ole Miss, and at home against Texas. So a very manageable schedule there in 2027. 2028, home against Florida, at home, on the road at South Carolina, at Tennessee, at home against Missouri, at home against, of course, Texas A&M, at home against Oklahoma, then on the road to Alabama, LSU, and Vanderbilt. Again, another very tough schedule for 2028 for the Kentucky Wildcats. Then in 2029, at Florida, at Auburn, at Georgia, at State, then host South Carolina, host Tennessee, host Arkansas, and host Ole Miss. So a very, very interesting home slate for Kentucky fans out there if you're looking to see some of the SEC West teams, of course, in action. Now, let us move to, of course, and I just lost where I was going, but let us move to the LSU Tigers here. The Tigers of Death Valley. 2026 at home against A&M, at Arkansas, and at Ole Miss. Those are our three rivalry matchups right there, and obviously I'm not mad about that list. But replace A&M, of course, with another team, and we'll be good to go. At home against Bama, at home against State, at home against Texas. Those are going to be very interesting matchups, and I really want to go to that Texas matchup and that Alabama matchup. Those two are going to be really, really fun. At Auburn, at Kentucky, and at Tennessee. Those are going to be very interesting for the Tigers as well, as LSU will travel to Neyland Stadium. That might also be one to go to for a Vols fan out there. Then in 2027, at Texas A&M, at Florida, at Georgia, at South Carolina. That's going to be a fun year on the road for Tiger fans, I'm sure. And then at home, you get Arkansas, Ole Miss, Missouri, Vanderbilt, and Oklahoma for the home slate in 2027. 2028, home against A&M, home against Kentucky, Auburn, and Tennessee. So basically 2026, but flip-flop. That Tennessee LSU game and Auburn LSU game may be a fun one to go to. I'm going to have to keep my eyes on that one, but those might be fun ones to go to. And then on the road, at Alabama, at State, at Texas, and then, of course, at Arkansas. That LSU at Texas game is going to be a banger, man, and I cannot wait for it. And then in 2029, at A&M, at Missouri, at Vanderbilt, at Oklahoma. So a very manageable road schedule there. And then at home against Arkansas, Ole Miss, Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina. So very manageable schedules for the LSU Tigers. Now, let us talk about the Ole Miss Rebels. At home against LSU, at home against State, at home against Auburn, at home against Georgia, and then at home against Missouri. That Ole Miss-Auburn game is going to be so much fun, and I hate I'm going to Florida Ole Miss this year in Oxford, so I may not have a chance to go back. But if I were going to go back, I were going to go to that Auburn at Ole Miss game. That might be a fun one. Then, at Oklahoma, at Florida, at Vanderbilt, and at Texas. So a very manageable road schedule for the Rebels. Excuse me there, as this video is getting a little bit long, but hey, it is what it is. We're talking college football, so hit that sub button, leave a comment down below so you don't miss out on any of the latest videos. Y'all see what I did there? Then, in 2027, at LSU, at Arkansas, at Tennessee, and at A&M, before coming home to Oklahoma, Alabama, Kentucky, and South Carolina. So, very manageable slate for Ole Miss in 2027 as well. Then, 2028, at home against LSU, at home against State, on the road against Oklahoma, at home against Florida, Vanderbilt, and Texas before going on the road to Auburn, Georgia, and Missouri. That Ole Miss-Auburn game in 2028, like I said, might be an absolute banger of a matchup, and we might have to make the trip to the Auburn University there. And then, of course, in 2029, to close us out, at Kentucky, at Bama, at South Carolina, at LSU, and at Mississippi State. So they have a tough road schedule in 2029. Before coming home to Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, and A&M. So it doesn't really get much easier for the Ole Miss Rebels in that one there. Now let us go to Mississippi State. At home against Bama, Vanderbilt, Auburn, Missouri, and Oklahoma. So my sister's first year, I might have to pull up to that Auburn-Mississippi State game. I'm not sure about that one yet. But that Alabama game is going to be a banger too. So we'll see about that one. At Ole Miss, at LSU, at South Carolina, and at Texas. So their road schedule does not get any easier. This is Mississippi State we're talking about. So again, like I said, their road schedule, they're going to have to compete in some of these games if they want to win the SEC next year. At Tennessee, at Kentucky, at Georgia, at Alabama, and at Vanderbilt in 2027. When you come home to play Ole Miss, Arkansas, Florida, and Texas A&M. So very manageable schedule in 2027 compared to 2026. But we'll see what the Dogs are made of coming soon. Then, in 2028, at home against Bama and Vandy before going on the road to Ole Miss, at home against LSU, South Carolina, and Texas. At least they don't have to go to Texas and LSU in 2028. And then, of course, on the road at Auburn, at Missouri, and at Oklahoma. That Auburn game might be the one to go to as well. But we'll see in the next couple of years. And then in 2029, at Bama, at Vandy, home against Ole Miss, home against Georgia, home against Kentucky, home against Tennessee. Lots of home games in 2029 for the Mississippi State Bulldogs. And then, of course, closing it out on the road at Arkansas, at Florida, and at Texas A&M. So that one is going to be a banger. Then, Missouri, of course. We got the Missouri Tigers on deck. Missouri hosting A&M, Oklahoma, going on the road to Arkansas in 2026 before coming home to play Florida, Kentucky, Texas, then on the road again, Ole Miss, Georgia, and Mississippi State in 2027. They go to A&M, go to Oklahoma, host Arkansas, host Auburn, host Tennessee, and host Vanderbilt. So lots of home games in 2027. That's very manageable for the Missouri Tigers. And then at A&M, at Oklahoma, at LSU, at Alabama, and at South Carolina. So they got their work cut out for them on the road in 2028 or in 2027. That's for sure. Let us go ahead and talk about 2028 for the Missouri Tigers, though, as we got A&M, Oklahoma, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Georgia, and Mississippi State all at home. Another very manageable home schedule for the Tigers. And then on the road, at Arkansas, at Florida, at Kentucky, and at Texas. So 2028 might be their best year. We shall see in due time. But in 2029, they go to A&M, they go to Oklahoma, they go to Auburn, Tennessee, and Vandy. That Missouri-Tennessee game is going to be an absolute banger as well. And then, of course, at home against Arkansas, Bama, LSU, and South Carolina. So their home slate does get a little better there. With us moving on to, of course, the Oklahoma Sooners. I believe after this one, for all you counters out there, we only have 5 more teams. So stay tuned for that. Let us talk about Oklahoma, though. Versus Texas, of course, Red River is going to be in, of course, Dallas for pretty much the entirety of it. So we won't talk about that. Then they host Ole Miss, host in 2026 and 28. 2027, they go to Ole Miss. Then in 2026, of course, in 2027, they go to Missouri. And then, of course, in 27 and 29, they host the Missouri Tigers. In 2029, they host Auburn. 2028, they host Florida. 2027, they host Alabama. 2027, they host Kentucky. Then they host South Carolina. Then they host Arkansas in 2027. Then they host Georgia. And then they host LSU. In 2029, Vanderbilt. In 2028, Mississippi State. In 2027, Tennessee. And then in 2026, of course, they host A&M before going on the road in 2026 to Florida, Georgia, and Mississippi State. Auburn, LSU, Vandy in 27. Kentucky, South Carolina, and A&M in 28. 29, Alabama, Arkansas, and Tennessee. Woo! We are just flying through these. Please, if you stuck around this long, hit that sub button. Consider hitting that sub button because it helps us out here at the channel with what we're doing. We already talked about South Carolina. We'll talk about Tennessee next as we talked about them. Texas, but the last one we'll talk about is the Vanderbilt Commodores, and then we'll wrap it all up, put it in a bottle because it's pretty much just the same. Let's talk about it now. Then we got the Vanderbilt Commodores in 2026. They host Tennessee. They're at Auburn, at State. Then they host Bama, host Arkansas, host Ole Miss. That might be their best year for hosting in a long time, as season ticket holders might be pretty happy on that one. At Florida, at Georgia, at Kentucky in 2027. Of course, in 2027, you got Tennessee on the road, LSU on the road, Missouri on the road, and A&M on the road. And then in 2027, you also host South Carolina, host Oklahoma, and host Texas. So getting Red Rivers with hosting Auburn and Mississippi State as well. 2028, this is probably going to be our last one, guys. So I don't know what we're doing anymore. We're just yapping. Hosting Tennessee, hosting, of course, Florida, Georgia, and Kentucky before going on the road to Alabama, Arkansas, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State, and Auburn. Man, their road games is actually insane. They have 6 or so road games in 2028, which is absolutely crazy. Then in 2029, at Tennessee, hosting Auburn, Mississippi State, LSU, Missouri, Texas A&M before going on the road again, South Carolina, Texas, and Oklahoma. So a pretty good year for hosting in 2027 as well. Woo! That's going to cut it, though, ladies and gentlemen, for today's Yappertron video. If you guys are new to the channel, you already know what to do. Leave a like, subscribe, turn that bell on. We will have NFL prediction here soon. Just give me a break. before we hop into this next video. So hit that sub button, leave a comment down below so you don't miss out on any of the latest videos. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.